The Charleston Symphony Orchestra is bouncing back after COVID paused a lot of activities. Today, I talk one-on-one with Executive Director of the orchestra, Michael Smith, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Michael Smith, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's great to be back with you, Quintin.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you're the Executive Director of the Charleston Symphony Orchestra. Who is Michael Smith these days?
Michael Smith is continuing this labor of love with the Charleston Symphony. You know, it is an unbelievable time for everybody around the globe. But performing arts organizations especially have been just hit really hard because our business model depends on people getting together to enjoy this wonderful art form. And so that's been such a challenge for us. And so to find a way to continue to serve our community during this time has been both something incredibly challenging, but something that I've been very proud that we've been able to continue to do because a lot of orchestras across the country haven't been able to. So this orchestra has a lot of grit and willpower and staying power, and it's a real team. And so keeping all of that together is what Michael Smith has been these last 6 months. And it's been really challenging, but also something I'm really grateful to be able to do for Charleston.
And what was that business model prior to COVID?
So we basically have our concerts and our education programs. And again, it's the ability that music is it's a convener of people through music. And one of the things that we've had to do, aside from we've been able to do some live performances, which obviously that's the biggest part of what we would normally do, we launched a virtual concert hall as part of being able to connect with people when they can't come to the hall. So it's a new part of our business model going forward. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is even post-COVID, we will continue to have this virtual concert hall where all of our performances will now be accessible much more broadly via our virtual concert hall on the internet. So through these challenges creates opportunity as well. So try to see positive in things right now.
And if I were to walk into that virtual concert hall, what can I experience?
So it's going to be an archive of all of our performances. And right now, during this time, one of the things that I was most sensitive to, it's been available to our subscribers and donors because we had a lot of people that even through the pandemic continued to subscribe to the symphony, even though they didn't even know whether we were going to be able to perform. So we were just so unbelievably grateful for the community's support during this time. So this concert hall was originally conceived as a gift to those supporters. But one of the things that we haven't done, and it's due to the pandemic, that is a big part of what the Charleston Symphony is and wants to be, is connected to a much broader part of our community. And so this Christmas, we just finished our Holiday Pops concert over the weekend, and it was just spectacular. It was the hooting and hollering, the reaction from the audience it was really made all of the hard work uplifting. And I thought, Charleston needs this right now, so we are going to launch this as a gift to our community. It'll be available for free on our virtual concert hall at charlestonsymphony.org for all of Charleston between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve to experience this Holiday Pops where people can gather around their computer or tablet or TV and watch this really uplifting performance of the Charleston Symphony. So I'm really proud to and excited to gift this to the Charleston community at a time where I think we need the healing power and the convening power of music right now. And so I'm really excited about that.
And you talked about the performance. I know that you all had free performances this past weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Which performance describes the Holiday Pops best?
The Holiday Pops, to me, the one word that comes to mind, and we did 3 performances. The word that comes to mind is joy. It really, and that's, maybe it's cliche, but I went to all 3 performances and I brought my son, and then just looking around the room, and, I think people felt good just to put on a coat and tie, but I think ordinarily on a good year, when it's not pre-pandemic, I would still say the word joy, but there was something really you could feel it in the room. Even though it was socially distanced, there was only about 300 people at the Gilliard Center, and as you know, it fits about 1,800 people. So
Right.
even with just 300 people in a space that large, you could feel this joy, and it was just awesome. And so I think joy is the best word I could use to describe it.
And if I'm sitting in front of my tablet and TV, which is that must watch, must see performance out of all three?
So this one, we will take. It'll be just one on there, and we will put the best one on there. They were all great, but we'll make sure the best one is on there.
And which one of those three performances from this past year that you want to see next year?
Oh, so this year is the 250th anniversary of Beethoven, and so we've been celebrating that all year. And so in each one of our Masterworks concerts, we're doing a Beethoven symphony. And one of the things that I like to think of is when this is all said and done, I'd like to release this to the public, where it's almost like a Netflix show where you can binge watch all of the Beethoven symphonies and sort of see the amazing progression of this man's life, of where he started and where he finished as he was losing his hearing, and sort of the personal tragedy that he had compared to when you get to his later symphonies, the amount of joy that comes out of his music compared to the amount of sort of personal torment he had as a musician losing his hearing. I'd like to think that that's a bingeable experience, sort of a Netflix binge thing, where you can get through the Charleston Symphony performing all of the Beethoven symphonies. Now, the one that we can't do this year is the 9th because of the chorus and because of COVID, but we're going to do the 9th as soon as possible, because I think that one will be such an appropriate way to get out of this pandemic, the 9th, an ode to joy. And I think will just be a really powerful way to come. So as soon as we can, I'd like to get to Beethoven's 9th.
And you obviously talked just about COVID, and I know I saw on the Facebook page last night that obviously you two all teamed up with MUSC to really test most of your performers before they get on stage. How many of those performers have actually been tested thus far?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. So we have two main partners in our ability to continue to serve the community. MUSC has been absolutely outstanding. Every musician that you see on the stage and every Gilliard staff member, for every performance all year, everybody has been tested. And that's really, when we set out to do this, we said the only way that we're going to do this is if we continue to present high quality performance, and as if we can do it safely. And if we can do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize our financial future. So we couldn't do it without the oversight and the testing of MUSC. So I'm really grateful to their leadership. They've been just outstanding. And then also I just want to take this opportunity to thank Steve Bedard and the Gilliard Center, because their team has just been unbelievably professional and makes everybody feel safe going into that beautiful building. And we couldn't do it without them. So I'm extremely grateful for both Pat Colley and Dave Cole at MUSC and Steve Bedard at the Gilliard Center and his team, because they've been, I said this at one of the concerts earlier this year, it's community partnerships like this that make Charleston an awesome place to work, where we have each other's backs in order to serve our community. Yes. What a great place to work when you have leadership like that in our community.
Yeah, those three gentlemen are awesome people, and I've obviously had both of them on for Quintin's close-ups, and I have Steve Bedard back on in February. But you talk about community partnerships. Who does this orchestra want to partner with next in the community?
Oh, that's a good question. So obviously MUSC is a new partner for us, but it's one that I think has a lot of opportunity in terms of, not just because of COVID, but I think there's so much that we can do together. So I'm looking forward to continuing this particular partnership and enriching it. And then also, I want to continue this path with our education programs and our community engagement. I still feel, and I'm very passionate about the symphony connecting with everybody in our community, and we're not there yet. But it's something I'm very passionate about with. So it's, when you say community partnership, I want it to be, yes, there are institutions we can partner with, but I want it to be with you and with all of the residents of our community in whatever way is most meaningful and connects them. And we're going to continue to work on this.
And speaking of obviously connecting, let me talk to you about Giving Tuesday. You said this on the Facebook page. Giving Tuesday is a global generosity movement unleashing the power of people and organizations to transform their communities and the world. Whether it's helping a neighbor, advocating for an issue, sharing a skill, or giving to the causes that speak to your heart, all of us have something to give, and every act of generosity counts. The Charleston Symphony is once again partnering in this particular global day in unity of giving and obviously, socializing and obviously community involvement. Let me ask you this, Michael. What's the power of the Charleston Symphony these days?
So, maybe I'm sorry to keep going back to this, but it
No
is
worries.
the concept of joy, because when people use this expression, the power of music, and it can somehow, if you don't think about it too much, it can sort of just it's an expression that can kind of just wash over you, and you don't really think about it. But one of the powers is that we can both sit in the room and experience this music, and somehow it connects us. And I think that's what the world needs so much more right now of, is that we're all in this together, that we're connected, that we're going to be stronger together. And so music almost serves as the convener of that. You and I might experience it differently, but somehow it's brought us together. And that's the role I see us playing in our community, as almost a convener and for a greater good.
And I know this might be a redundant question, but how will the Charleston Symphony Orchestra transform this community 5, 10 years from now?
That's a great question. So we're working on that. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing currently, we're going to continue to be what I think is a world-class orchestra for a world-class city. But to me, again, I'm sorry to keep going back to this, but right now we are not connecting nearly as broadly as we could. I believe that classical music and other music that we perform speaks to literally every human being, or has the ability to speak to and it might be different for everybody, but I want to bring it to everybody, and everybody can experience it in their own special way. But I want to break down some of the barriers and some of the exclusivity of it and bring it to everybody in Charleston.
What are those barriers right now that you want to knock down musically?
So from a musical point of view, that's interesting. I mean, I believe that literally every human being can be moved or connected to classical music, but not everybody has access, whether it's a cost or whether it's part of our education programs or things like that. It's historically been set up in a way that it is not necessarily welcoming or accessible. And so if we have a fundamental belief that it should be, what steps are we going to take to break that down? And so we've formed some new committees that we're going to work to make sure that this music is available for every person in Charleston. It's just something we're very passionate about.
And you talk about the difference in music these days. How has music changed you personally since COVID, since obviously taking over executive director many years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. Since I was little, I've always loved music. I mean, as you know, I was a trumpet player in the orchestra, and it's interesting because I think I appreciate it more now since I stopped playing than when I was actually in the orchestra. When you're a musician, it's this constant journey of perfection, this constant pursuit of perfection, something you'll never achieve, but you spend your whole life self-critical. Like, I could have done it better. I should be better. I could practice harder.
Right.
And then I stopped playing. And what it did for me is that and then after time, I sort of lost that judgment and started listening to music in a whole new way. And now I am able to actually enjoy it, and I see the uplifting aspects of it. And again, this concert this past weekend, yes, I went 3 times.
Wow.
And even for me, like, this was just really uplifting to hear live music again. So it's been an interesting journey to have music that I loved, but it was my work. Now it's my work, but in a different way. And I don't know, it hits me very differently now than it did when I was a performer.
And let me ask you this too. What causes besides the Charleston Symphony Orchestra speaks to your heart right now?
Kids, education. So I see particularly in our community. That's an easy one for me. I've been involved a little bit in education with the symphony, and I've served on the board of a charter school, and I just see that is education is the key for a young person, or the keys to the future. It's something you can't ever take away from a young person. And so to the extent possible, a real focus, whether it's through the symphony or not, for me, education in our community is a key area that I'm really interested in focused on.
And, I got to go back to my interview with you that we did at the Gilliard Center for Quintin's close-ups last year. And in that particular interview, you told me, hey, I'm working on building the financial sustainability that is for the future. How has COVID stopped that building?
It's been hard, as you can imagine. So I'm incredibly grateful for our community. This community has rallied behind the symphony. So we had our subscribers, vast majority of which have stuck with us, and our donors too. It has been an unbelievable outpouring of support. Where we've really been hurt has been a few things. One, single ticket sales. Because of COVID, we're not able to sell tickets to the concerts. We've only been able to have it available to our subscribers. So about $600,000 difference in single tickets this year compared to last year. So very, very significant revenue hit. And then also ATAX funding of the city. Of course, the city of Charleston, tourism is a major component of our city, and which brings in accommodations tax. And so the symphony is always a recipient of a grant from the city. And obviously the city budget has been incredibly affected as well. That put a pretty big hole in our budget for this year, and likely going forward as well. But we're gonna keep kicking and scratching our way through this. I think hard work is hard, and we're gonna keep working at this. And I've just been overwhelmed by the support of the community. So even with those hits that we've taken, we're able to still keep performing. And we're making plans for the future, and there are different plans than we had before COVID. But I think every organization is facing that right now. You could have whatever plans you had are going to be put on hold and adjusted because of this really challenging global pandemic.
And when you look at your particular budget, what are those things that you unfortunately have to take out, and those things that you have to keep in?
Yeah, well, we're doing everything we can to keep programming, to keep the concerts, and to keep our education program. This year, unfortunately, we were not able to do the education programming that we usually do. And it was, primarily the schools are struggling just to get the kids in the classrooms to get their, normal academics done. So the idea that they're going to take time out to have us come in the schools, and whether we could even do that safely. This year in particular, I'm disappointed because the education programs is something that I'm so passionate about that we do. And we've certainly done some work. We've launched some videos and partnered with some teachers, and we've done what we can, but I'm very much looking forward to getting back to our work in the schools. And so that's something that we really missed this year.
And normally, how many schools do you all go and visit?
We go to almost 100 schools every year in the Tri-County area. It's between about 80 and 100 depending on the year and the teachers' schedules and everything. But and then most of those, so we will send a chamber music group or a small group of musicians into the schools. And then later in the year, we try to bring all of those kids that have experienced that and got to see our musicians up close. We try to bring them to the Gilliard Center for a young people's concert where they get to see the full orchestra in that amazing space. So we try to connect it from the classroom to the stage.
And how many schools were you planning to go to this year?
Pre-COVID, we were looking at going to 100 schools again. Like I said, the education program, honestly, of all the things that we do, that would be the last thing that I cancel. And so, the pandemic made it really virtually impossible this year. But the minute we can get back in there, we'll be back in there. And the idea is, it's not so much more schools, it's what can we do that has more impact? So those are the kind of things that we're, I like the fact that we're in 100 schools, but over time, the thing that I'm going to be measuring more is what kind of impact we're having on these young people rather than just the number of schools. And so that's going to be an important metric for us going forward, and something that we're working on right now.
And how impactful are you guys in the schools these days?
These days, like I said, with COVID, we're just not able to get into the schools right now. So that was probably, of all the things with the symphony and the pandemic, that's probably the most disappointing to me, is that we can't be in the schools right now. Even the youth symphony was off for the first half of this year. I'm very pleased that the team has been working hard on safety protocols. I think we're going to be able to get the youth symphony back together with particular safety protocols after the new year. So we'll at least get that program, I think, back on track. But it's likely that we won't get back in the schools until next year. But we'll do it. We'll do it in earnest next year for sure. Absolutely.
And you talked to me about those plans that you all had prior to COVID. What were those other plans?
It all sort of ties together to the beginning of this conversation, and it's connecting to more people in our community. I think we have a really special group of musicians. The staff are dedicated, the board. We've got this wonderful partnership with the Gilliard. We've got something amazing here in Charleston, and I want to share it with everybody.
Yes,
and
indeed.
So to me, our plan was, the major component of our plan going forward is to get the symphony much more connected to a broader audience. And that's not going to change, and that's not changing today, and it's not going to change tomorrow. I believe this orchestra is for everybody in our community, and we're going to keep fighting for that.
Where is that broader audience?
Right now we have sort of what I'll call a traditional symphony audience, and that broader audience. I mean, we've got a lot of downtown patrons, a lot of Kiowa, a lot of Mount Pleasant, certainly North and West in terms of just geographic area. But to be really blunt about it, we serve right now, and I'll just be really upfront about it, a predominantly white audience. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe that classical music has the power to impact, affect, and have an emotional impact on every human being. And therefore, what can I do to bring it to non-traditional audiences like that aren't currently in the concert hall? So the African American community, the Latin community. Sure. I think we've got real opportunity there in Charleston, and we've formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee recently under the leadership of Kellen Gray, our assistant conductor, and co-chairing that committee with Edward Hart, who's the chair of the music department at the College of Charleston, and looking at ways, both in terms of programming and engagement, that if we're passionate about music being accessible, available, and we believe that it has the ability to have this impact, what are we doing about it? And as you know, we had this Concert for Equality back in June.
Right.
To me, that was just a launching pad. It wasn't a destination. And so I think we have a lot of work left to do in this area, and we're in the middle of formulating plans, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but it's something I'm really passionate about. And so I think that there's so much opportunity here for us to, our mission is to inspire and engage our community.
Yes, indeed.
There's so much more opportunity to live that mission, and I'm very determined to do it.
And I know we all can't look towards, we can't see what's going to happen next in the future, but what do you hope the destination will be when it comes to obviously reaching these other broader communities?
That it does serve as this inspiration, as this convener. I think Charleston can sometimes, as great a city as it is, it can sometimes feel separated, whether it's geographically, whether it's socioeconomically. It can feel sometimes disjunct. And if music can be one of the tools that we use to bring our community closer together, we will have done something that I think we can be really proud of.
Yes.
And that it makes our community a better place to live. And that's really my, zoomed out goal of what I'd love the Charleston Symphony to serve as.
And I know, absolutely. And I know in the last interview I did with you for Quintin's Close-Ups, you talk about the financial goals that you want for the organization. What market trends and demand support your goals right now?
So, the pandemic is going to have an impact on this. And one of the things that I think are there is going to be a pent-up demand to get off the computer and experience things live.
Yes.
And so I'm hopeful from a business point of view that we can deliver that and also take advantage of it so that we can live our mission better and have the financial means to do so. But I believe that there's going to be a pent-up demand coming out of COVID. And based on what I see in the hall for the people that are able to attend, they just seem, I mean, just to people to get out of their pajamas and put some, I felt like such an adult the other night, putting on a suit and tie and everything. I mean, I think there's going to be opportunity there. And frankly, beyond the symphony, just an appreciation for a lot more that we get to experience in our lives on a daily basis that have been taken away by the pandemic. I think people are going to have a newfound appreciation for things like performing arts, things that they didn't know that they missed until they were gone. So I think there's real opportunity there.
Yeah, and I should have asked you this question earlier when you talked about obviously diversity in the music and how you want to reach more of the community. But when it comes to African Americans and other, minorities, why is there a disconnect when it comes to classical music?
It's a few. There's a lot of reasons for it. It's been set up that way for centuries, and so it is. It's a industry that has got all of this history, and it's very, very reluctant to change. And so, in order for it to change, we've got to make a conscious effort for it to do so. And it's always been this sort of, if you go back in the times of like Mozart or Beethoven, they were commissioned by dukes and kings and queens to write this music. So it was really commission based and it was about money, but the actual experience of the art isn't about money. And so how do you break down centuries of this historical barrier and break it down to what the art form is, which is a connection to humanity. And so you really have to make a conscious choice to change history. And like I said, this industry, there's a lot of reasons that it's sort of stuck in this pattern. But I think the Charleston Symphony has the flexibility and, frankly, the determination to make this change, and we're really committed to it.
And what will that art form be in the next 5 years?
I think that the art form, like the presentation, like classical music in and of itself, I mean, musicians playing, that is not fundamentally going to change. But how we welcome people, how we present it, how we make it so that, if I'm really blunt, I mean, we put on bow ties, tails, and then even just sometimes entering the Gilliard Center, which is this stunning facility. But I think it can be intimidating too if you've never been. You don't know what to expect when you go to a concert. You're worried you might clap at the wrong time. You're worried you might not wear the right thing. We need to get rid of all of those stereotypes and all of those sorts of, I'll call them like emotional barriers, where it's like, well, I might enjoy this, but what if I clap in the wrong place? You know what? Clap anywhere you want. I was at a concert in New York once, and it was in Carnegie Hall, and there was a young person, maybe 5 or 6 years old, this young girl, and she started dancing, and there was some patrons around that were like annoyed that this young person was dancing to music. And I thought, she's having the most natural reaction you can possibly have to music. This is awesome. And I think that's the kind of environment, when you say what's going to be different, how can we create an environment where someone can have a natural response, like a 5-year-old dancing to music, and not be feeling like they did something wrong? Like it's actually your body's natural reaction to it. So that's the kind of thing that I'd like to think through a little bit.
Well, that's amazing. That's very amazing. Well, Michael Smith, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
I always love spending time with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.